Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Taking a look today at my first computer I ever built for myself. This is what I upgraded to after my 486. You can take a quick look at that video in my channel. Taking a look at my first 486 Tower of Power is the other video. This computer, when I decided to upgrade to it, I decided to go ahead and build my own computer rather than buying a pre-built system. I figured it was better than getting all the preloaded software crap that typically came with your system of the day. They were always trying to differentiate themselves, they being the manufacturers, the OEMs, were always trying to differentiate their systems by the bundled software that they provided, which largely did not appeal to me. I never really cared for the majority of the bundled software ever, and I figured I could save a lot of money by building my own, so that's what I did. I saved up lots of money, and I upgraded from my 486 to a Pentium II 300 megahertz system, which I've since upgraded to a 333 to max out for the 440LX chipset. The Pentium II 33 being the fastest 66 megahertz frontside bus Pentium II available before the Pentium IIs moved on to the 100 megahertz frontside bus. I also originally had purchased 32 megs of RAM for this system, and then quickly followed it up with another 32 megs of RAM, making it 64 megs originally in its original configuration, which I found to be the sweet spot for running Windows applications. I had noticed that even with like Windows 95 before, even though 4 or even 8 megs was ideal, and I put ideal in quotes, Windows 95, even in 8 megs of RAM, did not leave enough RAM free for running any decent-sized applications without significant swapping and causing a performance drop. And mind you, this is all before we had Ultra DMA hard drives, so we were still using PIO, which required that the processor handle all hard drive interactions, and so when you were using swap file on the hard drive, it really bogged down your system between using it for memory and having to resort to really slow speeds. Even 8 megs of RAM on Windows 95 was less than ideal. Even 16 megs of RAM did not leave you a whole heck of a lot free right after first boot up. You didn't have to have much loaded, and the operating system would consume most of the RAM. It wasn't until you started hitting around 48 to 64 megs of RAM that you started getting enough free for some decent applications yourself. I mean, I suppose, fortunately, most applications weren't very large at the time. They didn't consume but maybe a few megs of RAM, maybe up to 10 megs, which wasn't very large. But still, if you multitasked heavily, you would start running into out-of-memory, swap file performance issues. But I did go ahead and upgrade to 512 megs of RAM in this system, which is more than enough, obviously, but it's the maximum amount that the chipset supports. Also, even though I do have an Ultra DMA 33 hard drive in here, the Ultra DMA 33 chip in the South Bridge seemed to have malfunctioned, so I ended up putting in a Promise Ultra 133 card in there. Obviously, the hard drive can't take advantage of the 133, but it runs a lot better than what was on the onboard part of the chipset, and it's a very nice performant Maxtor hard drive system, which not many people really cared for Maxtor back in the day. So let's take a look at some of the performance of games. I have like Wind Bowl here. This is actually a Windows 3.1 game. I think you could play it with Win32s with this specific version, the 3.2 version. I think the writer had done that on purpose. Not a big bowling fan myself, but I did really enjoy doing the digital version of bowling. This particular game didn't require a whole lot of processing power or memory. It was a fairly small game, but it was fun. It was really fun, and that was the important thing. Spent many hours playing the original Diablo and even some Dungeon Keeper. Still love this game to this day. But you know what? Let's take a quick look at 3D Max. Let's take a look at what this Voodoo 3 3000 can do that I have in here. The original configuration, again, was actually an ATI All-in-Wonder. This was before the Radeon All-in-Wonder became super popular. So I think it was a Rage Pro All-in-Wonder at the time. But I now have a Voodoo 3 3000 in here. I want to say it has 16 megs of memory. Run a Voodoo 3 3000 AGP. Total texture memory. Total video card memory. Yeah. It's a 16 meg card. Some of the memory is consumed for driver and display purposes. But let's go ahead and run. We don't need CPU performance. We don't really care about... Where are the CPU tests? Synthetics and rendering. Oh, you know what? It doesn't take a whole lot. So let's go ahead and run all of them, and we'll be back at the end. Well, maybe I'll let this shoot a little bit, give you a view of a Voodoo 3 paired with a Pentium II. I know Voodoo 3s were generally paired with Pentium 3s. They were probably a much better fit for Pentium 3s. But they were really good for Pentium 2s as well, since they were a little underpowered. The power of the Voodoo card could really help with overall 3D performance. As you can see, it's pretty smooth at 800 by 600 with 16-bit colors. No stuttering, and I'm not dropping back to, well, I should hope not with 512 megs of RAM, but I'm not dropping back to virtual memory at all. Maybe a good test would have been to drop this back down to 64 to show what it would look like if you were using 64 megs of RAM on a Pentium II. As you can see, it doesn't perform that bad. I do prefer to shoot my videos on a flat panel because I don't have to worry about synchronizing the video refresh rate with my camera on my phone. So this obviously isn't a full replication of what you would be playing with back in the day, but at least allows me to capture video a lot easier by just pointing my camera at it and doing a voiceover. Yeah, all smooth sailing. I think even my All-in-Wonder Rage chip had some difficulties processing some of these textures, if I remember correctly, and the Voodoo 3 3000 really outshined it. But I was disappointed that they didn't have optimization for 32-bit color, because this was right around that time frame where 32-bit color was becoming a thing, and 3DFX had chosen to focus on 16-bit color, insisting that 32-bit wasn't necessary or wasn't a reality just yet. ATI actually was the one that pushed that. ATI started optimizing their chips and their drivers for 32-bit colors, leaving even NVIDIA behind before, or at least having to play catch-up. And of course 3DFX was purchased by NVIDIA later, so 3DFX never released a video card that was optimized for 32 bits that I'm aware of. Maybe the Voodoo 4 or 5000 or something might have, but the Voodoo 3 3000 series was not optimized for 32-bit colors. But yeah, you can see the performance is really good, no stuttering at all. Incidentally, the Voodoo 3000 only has a heatsink. It doesn't have a fan, and has a bad tendency for overheating a system. Definitely need adequate cooling if you're going to be using a Voodoo 3 in your system. In fact, the case shell that I originally had my Pentium II in did not have adequate cooling, and I thought I lost everything. My whole system started behaving very weirdly. Fortunately, no actual damage was suffered. I thought the whole hardware took a dump because of the overheating. The chips and the components were all just about to the point of being fried because I did not have enough ventilation. So I ended up having to swap the shell into a case that had adequate ventilation. And after I let the motherboard cool down and everything cool down, everything was working just fine. I was so relieved. So the case that I have it in is not the original case that I was using. I was originally using a much smaller, less ventilated case. I could show the insides of the computer. Maybe I'll still do that towards the end of this video. But, most of you have already seen slot 1 processors in the insides. You've seen PCI slots. You don't need to have a reminder of what that looks like. This is running on a Gigabyte GA686LX motherboard. And that's the original motherboard that I had chosen for this build way back in the day, back in the, I want to say it was 97, 98-ish, that I ended up building this system. Never regretted it. Always thought that this particular Gigabyte board was great. But in my next build after this, I did jump ship and go over to Asus or Asus, or I don't know how people pronounce it. I've always pronounced it Asus. So there you are. There's my 3D Mark 99 Max score. I know people have seen much higher scores with much faster processors, but I thought this was pretty impressive for a Pentium 2 with Voodoo 3 graphics. Let's take a quick look over here at what SiSoft Sandra has to say about this system. Give a quick look at the overview. There's the Pentium II 333 detected. It's got full 512 kilobytes of ECC onboard L2 cache built right into the processor. You can't actually upgrade that at all. There's the 440LX chipset being recognized, and my 512 megs of RAM. Only 30% of it is actually allocated or loaded, which gives it plenty of space for applications to use. And there it recognizes my AWE64 value card in my system. Quick look at more motherboard information here. It's closely related to the EX chipset. I think the only difference was that, if I remember correctly, the EX chipset actually included UDMA 66 and was targeted specifically at Celeron processors. Celeron Slot 1 and even later Celeron Socket 370 processors. I find it funny that it says that it has a maximum installable memory of 128 megs of RAM and a maximum module size of 32 megs, and I'm running 512 via 4 128 meg modules. I know that this is not a caching problem, because I know that the Pentium II chips, the early releases of them would cache up to 512 megs, no problem, by default. Later models of the Pentium II would cache all 4 gigs of the addressable range without a problem. So I think this is actually just a SiSoft Sandra mistake here, thinking that that's the maximum installable memory on a 440LX chipset, because it's not even close to true. Let's take a quick look at some benchmarks in SiSoft Sandra, see what it has to say about the performance of this system. I was so proud of this system too when I first built it. It it was my first challenge in building my own system, and I did well. I think I think I ended up paying only $800 for the whole system, and the majority of that was the Pentium II 300 at the time. The RAM was fairly cheap. I didn't expand until later, but it was a good system. 333 falls right in between a 500 megahertz system and a 266 megahertz system, which sounds about right. Let's take a look at the multimedia benchmark. This is where they test MMX, 3D Now, and SSC performance. The Pentium 2 does not have SSC. That didn't get released until the Pentium 3. But it does have MMX technology. And the MMX integer performance is pretty good. It's obviously not as fast as a Pentium 3 500, but it is certainly faster than a Pentium 266. The advantage of having a newer processor at the time, at least at the time this software was written, certainly the Pentium 3s weren't available when I bought this computer, you got SSE performance, which really helped boost overall application performance for applications that were compiled and running SSC. It was a big jump in performance. MMX never really caught off. There were some titles, and it definitely boosted performance. It just never really caught on, though. And let's do a quick drive benchmark to show you how this drive performs on a Promise Ultra 133 controller. It takes a while to run this test, so I'm not going to bore you with sitting here staring at the screen watching it. I will pause and come right back. Okay, the benchmark just ended. It took a pretty long time, which is why I'm glad I went ahead and paused the video. But here we get to see it compared to another 8.4 gig hard drive that claims to be UDMA. Doesn't say what speed UDMA, so I assume that's just standard UDMA 33. And as you can see, this is UDMA 33 hard drive, but it's connected to the Promise UDMA 133 card, and it outperforms it by a pretty wide margin. I don't know what manufacturing can make a big difference in overall system hard drive performance. So I have no idea what manufacturer this was or what their process technology was like at the time. Same goes for this UDMA 6.4. I don't know why this one is that much slower. Presumably they're both DMA 33 hard drives. And then EIDE, it doesn't really give an idea of what speed was at PIO mode 4, which does 16 megabytes per second, and then maybe this was PIO mode 3, which does 8 megabytes per second, and it doesn't give you any indication, so unfortunately we don't get a very good idea. I also don't know how much having a very large file cache installed affects my overall performance, so perhaps that could also explain why my DMA 33 outperforms the rest. I don't know whether to attribute it to the RAM cache, the file cache, or if I should attribute it to the card itself. It does feel faster than when I had it connected to the onboard UDMA 33 that died, so I can't use it anymore. So I want to attribute it at least partly to the card that's installed. But I mean, overall, that's my system. This is what I used to use after my 486. I still have this computer, still like it very much. It doesn't have everything on it that it used to have. Used to have it loaded up with games. This was my mid to late 90s system. I believe I built this around late 97, early 98. So all the 3D games that were just starting to come out at the time is what I would play on here. Used to play games like Diablo 1. Was actually late to that, to this game. Loved playing this online on battle.net. And love myself some Dungeon Keeper. I know 66 Megahertz Brain just recently released a video at the end showing the intro video playing for Dungeon Keeper. Such a great introductory video for a video game that I've ever seen. It was really good, even if it was still using sprite technology for the graphics. It was really good. So yeah, this was my system. Its configuration has changed since its original configuration back in the day, but I still own it. Still very proud of this build. From here, I came from a 486 133 to a Pentium II 300, and now it's a 333. I decided to upgrade a couple years later again, maybe about a year and a half later, and I always targeted like double the clock speed performance. So I ended up going from this 300 to a Pentium 3 700, which I then lost in a lightning strike, so I no longer have that system. Ended up having to quickly rebuild because I needed a computer at the time. Ended up quickly rebuilding to a Pentium 3 800. The 700 was doing the 100 megahertz frontside bus. I upgraded to a 800 EB, so that was the copper mine on the 133 megahertz bus, and that I jumped to. And I noticed even with the 100 megahertz increase, that with the 133 bus really helped out overall game and application performance. I don't have that system either. I think I ended up losing that one, or I think I gutted the parts because that motherboard, I think, died, if I remember correctly. And then my next computer after that, which I do still have, and maybe I'll be doing my next video on, the computer I upgraded to after the Pentium 3 800 EB was a Pentium 4 1.6 gigahertz system. And that was with the venerable Intel 815 chipset, which did use SD-RAM and was just as solid and stable as the 440BX, with the exception that it only supported up to 512 megs of RAM, whereas the BX would support up to a full gig of RAM, and I think the GX upgraded that to 2 gigs of RAM. Either way, getting off topic. So that's video ideas for the future. I am currently going through showing off the pieces in my collection, talking about what makes them unique. This not only is the first computer I ever built, but it also is my only Pentium II on a 66 megahertz frontside bus system. I want to do other videos on video games. I have a couple up already, both retro games from the late 80s, early 90s, and even modded video games I plan on doing. Maybe that's not your thing. It's cool. So if you like what you see, please give it a thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. If you want to come along for my journey and see some of the other things I have in store, then give me a subscribe. I really appreciate it. It will help the channel grow. I'm very impressed with the numbers I've been receiving lately. Very humbled. I achieved 95 subscribers. I can't believe 95 people are actually subscribed to my channel and want to see what I have to show, especially with my stream of conscious rambling. But I'm happy, I'm excited, and I hope more of you want to come along for the ride. I also eventually want to do some videos on programming in C and C++, both for DOS era applications, as well as I wouldn't mind writing like a early 32-bit application for like 95 or NT4 or something. Maybe I'll share some of my coding videos. I'm not a great coder. I'm a hobbyist coder, so keep that in mind. If I ever show a video and you're watching this in the future. And once again, if you don't like the video, you can go ahead and downvote it. It does not tell me that you don't like my stuff. It doesn't hurt my feelings. It merely tells the algorithm that you don't like this content, you don't want to see it anymore. And that's perfectly fine. So if you like the video, please give it a like. If you don't like it, downvote the shit out of it. It doesn't bother me one bit. But for those of you that have chosen to stay, I really appreciate you being here. Really appreciate you watching my videos. And I will see you in the next one. Thank you.